Hello and welcome to our Ranorex webinar, Ranorex Studio Hands-on Applied RanoreXPath Optimization. My name is Andreas and it's a pleasure to be your host today. Let me start with a short introduction and a few facts. The target audience of today's webinar are supposed to be at practitioner's level. Don't worry, there's no need for any preparation. The test application as well as all the examples are available for download from within the user guide. And this webinar is also being recorded. The duration of today's webinar will be approximately 1.5 hours. What are the hands-on webinars? So we aim to achieve covering real problem solving based on years of experience. It's supported by all of our Ranorex internal and external experts. And we try to empower you to test smarter and create more stable solutions. So that's what we want to do. And we have a plan for a whole lot of this year, so maybe you want to have a look on that. So today we are doing some applied RanoreXPath optimization, and this is the plan for the next month. So next month we will do some remote testing, and then we will have some user code examples, and so on and so forth. So maybe every now and then you reach out to our website and have a look on what we are currently doing. I would like to start by telling you what we will learn today. So I give you a glance of all the topics we are doing. First of all, it's not only RanoreXPath specific things directly, but everything which is in common, which is referenced to somehow to the RanoreXPath. There will be lots of best practices and good advices. So first of all, we will be doing have a look on repository variables and their application. We will do some list item tracking and identification and table item tracking, doing some nasty things there. Then I will show you how to handle tree and subtree element selections, even or especially when they are hidden within the trees or the subtrees. I will show you how to use wildcards to search for UI elements. And at the end, I would like to introduce the concept of defined automation identifiers. And some things along the way will be tracking and have a look at the visibility of hidden UI elements, of course. We will deal with some search time and timeout adjustments and have a look on the error behavior of Ranorex Studio and the option of continuing on a fail. And yes, if there's time, we will see how to apply regular expressions when it comes to RanoreXPath specification. So this is the plan for today, and hopefully I'll be able to cover all of it. And yes, I would say let's start into that. That's why I have already prepared the test solution with a number, so I'm not able to begin everything from the scratch today, so it will be snippets with things I show you. And I would like to start by showing you something in here with the parameterized register selection. And to do so, we're using our Ranorex demo application, which can be downloaded from our download server. And yeah, first of all, I would like to deal with some optimization when it comes to repository item variables, so variables within the RanoreXPath specification. So let's assume we would like to select those registers here. So we need to have a function to select the registers of this application here. And the usual way you would do that is we would create a new recording module, and let's call it select database. If we select the distinctive register panel, then we would suddenly, of course, use the track function here and track our register panel, and I click it. Then I have the repository item in there, and then of course we drag it up into the action panel and create a mouse click event. So this would be the usual way of doing so. And then you could use this recording module in order to choose this database register panel. But what if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 panels? What if you need to do some sanity testing and need to verify that all of these are here? So this is not a good way of doing that. So that's why you should use a variable within the repository item, and that's how we do that now. So first of all, we would like to create a new module here. So I do new modules, and at the end I give you the solution for download. So I will prepare the solution for download so you could download it. So let's call it select register to make it more general. And then I need to come to this general repository item, and we have the test database repository item here for this register panel here, and that's not what we want. So I simply copy paste it. So I clone it, Control C, Control V. So I have a copy of it, and I now rename it to register to give it a general name. And what we do now is I open it in SMI, which is the easiest way to work in there. And there you can see that this repository, the RanoreXPath specification consists of an attribute which is the accessible name. And if I open up the drop-down list on the right side, then you could see here's all the entries for the different register panels, and I create a new variable here, and I call it variable register. And the default value should not be test database, but the first register, which is the introduction register panel. I click OK, and then we have this variable instead of this fixed string, and it's always necessary to click apply in the upper right corner though, to make it valid. So now we have the repository item called register, and we have parameterized it by means of a variable within the RanoreXPath specification. So now I'm able to define a mouse click action, and I click save, and I click close, and I close the other one too, and now I could use it. So from the module view here, we do the select register, we drag it over to my test case, I put it in front before the delay, and all I need to do is now to bind it. So let's assume we would like to make a sanity test here. So I have already defined a data source, which I right click now on the test case here, and I open the data source. So you see I have defined all the registers, all the 7 registers in here. And all I need to do now is I need to bind the register to my module variable and click OK. And then I easily can run it, and we can watch this sanity test here. So let's see how this works. Ranorex is preparing the solution. It's opening up the debug information and the application soon. So here we go. And now you could watch, we are performing the sanity test by clicking through all of these UI elements here. So this is what it's done. And by the end, we have a successful test report. So when we look inside here, you could see that we crawl through all these registers and perform a simple mouse click on them. So you could also do something more, and you could simply do a report in here. So just to show you this, you could also not only click on the register, you could do some validation, of course, if it's a sanity test. And you could also do something like put in capturing a screenshot and printing in here, selected register panel, and then you have a screenshot along with your report. So this would also be something which is possible here. So one of the applications of the main applications of this would be something like, select this and step into the menu validation. I have prepared something here. So one of the main applications would be something like a sanity test for a menu. So for example, if you open up if at the beginning, before you do some functional tests, you perform a sanity test, which means you try to validate if all the menu and submenu items are there and existing, if they have the correct naming and the correct order or something like that. So one application would be to open up the support menu and check if all of these submenus here are really existing and have their proper names. And I created a small test case here. It's called menu validation. It opens up the support menu, and then it goes through all of these submenus. So I have defined a data source, which uses all of or consists of all of those submenu items there. And I did a data binding into my validation recording module. And all I do here is I move with my mouse through the submenus. I validate if the submenu is there and has exactly the same name as it is supposed to have. And I print a small report with a screenshot into the report there. And I would like to show you how this works. So let me show you this. So it's the menu validation. We simply run the test, and you could watch this small little sanity test of one submenu. Of course, you could extend this to all the menus and submenus, and this could be used to create a perfect sanity test prior to a functional test. So you could see it's opening the support menu. It's going through all of these menu items now. And at the end of the day, we have a successful report here, which shows us that we have all the submenus of this support menu being available. So let me point out one of those here. So test data would be the webinar submenu, and the validation here is, I would like to use it with the spotlight. So we're having the data here. So it's the webinar submenu. We have a mouse movement to this menu. We have a validation, so we validate if it's really named that way. And we have a small screenshot here too, which shows us that we are within the correct submenu. So this is some kind of application for a repository variable, meaning a variable within the RanoreXPath specification. So then, yes, one down, and still a number of things to go, and that's why we now have a much closer look at some list item tracking and identification. So I have, I think, some really interesting things here for us. So what I do first is now I do first apply what we already have prepared, namely the selection of the register. So I have a test case here. It's called list item selection. And yes, after starting the application, I need to switch into the test database here. And I do this by means of my existing select register recording module. And I need to bind it now to something. So I right click and I bind it to a parameter which I already have prepared. So I have prepared a parameter register with the value of test database, and I bind it to my module variable. So it's quite easy to reuse a parameterized recording module with a variable within the RanoreXPath specification. So what do we want to do now? Let's assume what I have prepared here is I have prepared two smart folders here, one to insert data into the database, and the second one to delete the data again. So one I have prepared is a list, a data source, and the data source consists of 8 entries here. It's 8 names with age, gender, and department affiliation. and I would like to insert those data. So I have a recording module which is called set insert name, and I'm setting the first name and the last name into the name text field. And just as a regular user, I would like now also to insert the department here. And I'm as a maybe a beginner, I would like to ignore the selection of this department list here. I'm a smart guy, and I would like to insert the department directly. So I'll show you what to do now. I create a new recording module for the database, and I call it, let's call it, yes, let's call it insert department. Let's call it insert department. And what I do now is I simply, as a smart user, I simply use the track button. I track this text entry field of the department here. So I have it here. It's called text1001. So I rename it to TXT department. And as a smart guy, again, I define a set value action. So I directly would like to put the department into this text entry by means of a variable. So I define a variable department, and I save it and I close it. And now I'm using this herein. And all I need to do is now I need to bind my variable to the department here. So I'm opening up the binding dialog and I bind it to my department. So what I have now is I'm inserting the name, the department, and adding it to the list. And this is all I want to show you for the moment. So I close my application, and yes, let's run this small module now, this small test. And let's see what's happening now. And I kindly ask you to watch the insertion of the names and the department when it's added to the list. So let's have a look at that. So the first name is John Public from the project management department. Then we have Mary Bach of the sales department, Henry Rogers of the support, and watch out the insertion in the department text entry field. You can see that, of course, the departments are inserted there whenever the person is in. So Will Thomas is one of the last ones, and Nicole Wallace is definitely the last one. So we are finished now with entering of all the names with the department. And obviously, first of all, we have a green pie chart. So we have a report with a green pie chart which tells us it has been done successfully. And I would like to have a more closer look inside there. So let's go for Mrs. Bach, I guess. Oh no, it's Mr. Bach, Thomas Bach. He's, let me show you this now. So we have a successful, again, remember, we have a successful test report. We have a department here. He's from the development department, and it's directly set into the text entry field of this department here, of the department text entry field. So it was done successfully. But obviously, if we have a more closer look on our result, we see that no department has really been inserted. And yes, this might be one point which is not directly affiliated with the RanoreXPath specification, but it's one of the most commonly used failures. So functional testing is not always taking a short way of directly inserting something in here. Although we have a very correct RanoreXPath specification of this department here. So if we highlight it, you could see it's the correct text entry field. So we inserted it very correctly. There's no error in the RanoreXPath specification, but as a matter of fact, it doesn't work. So functional testing is always also about doing it the same way as the user would do it. So not inserting the department directly in this list, but opening the list and selecting from the list. And this is what I would like to show you as an improvement now. So I close the insert department recording module, and I also close the report by itself. I remove this insert department recording module from here, and I create a new one, which I would like to call instead select department. And the easiest way would be now to first track the button to open this list. So we have here a repository item which I call button open department list, and simply create a mouse click on that. And the second would be now to choose one of those departments here and then generalize it by means of a RanoreXPath variable. So what we do here now is we track one of those elements, and unfortunately I cannot go inside the list. You already know that. So this is why I use a different way, the instant tracking. So let's go for the support, and I press now Control and the Windows key instantly, simultaneously, and now we have this department list in here. And what I have prepared already is a parameterized department repository item. So I open it in Spy to show you. So I have replaced the entry by a variable here. So this is what I already have done. And that's why I could use this now for the selection. And now I have this two-step selection. I save it and I close it. You might already know these things. And then let's put it in here and bind it to our department data source, and we are fine now. So let me run this, because I would like to show you then a very interesting thing, which is directly connected to the RanoreXPath specification. So let's run this test and see if it works. So now, if you watch the test execute, you should see that it is executed in a real functional way, which means we do it as the user would do it, and this verifies that the result is a good one, it's a successful one, and the departments are inserted correctly. So we have the John Public from the project management, and if you watch out the list on the right side, then you see that now we have the correct departments where the persons are affiliated to within the list of departments. So here we go. We're good in time. We already have half an hour, so still there's 1 hour to go. And we're waiting for the 8 persons to be inserted here. I would say well done. Again, we have a successful test report. I don't want to step inside this anymore now, but you could watch the list here now, and the list contains now the names and the correct department. So, but I would like to draw your attention now to something else. And something else means I would like to draw your attention to the deletion of the removal of these list elements. At the end of a test, you probably would like to empty the list here, again, to make sure or to test if removing the list is also successful. And removing this list is also done in a two-step way. So there's two options to do that. You could always use the first one and click the delete entry, and another first one and click the delete entry. So this would be a way of deleting the complete list and doing it as many times as entries are in the list. And one way of doing that would be very easy. So I create a new recording module, and it's a database module, and I would call it remove list entries. No, that was wrong. Removing list entries, this was wrong. I didn't want to do it that way. I wanted to do it more in a more modular way. So first of all, it's about selecting an entry. So let's select the first list entry. This is the first recording module. So again, a database module, and let's call it select first list entry. So here we go. And what do we do now is we need to identify the first list entry. So I'm using the track button here, and I'm identifying the first list entry of my list. You could see that here. So I'm clicking the first list entry, and I have it as a repository item in there. But unfortunately, you could see it's not it's not the first one, in fact. So it was the first list entry I selected, but in fact, it's not the first one. It's affiliated with a number of attributes in here, and it's very specific to Henry Rogers, age of default 0, and affiliated to the support department. So we need to do some changes here. So first of all, I changed the name, and I call this repository item now first list item. Although we know it's not the first at the moment. So what we do is now I don't open it in SMI. I directly change the RanoreXPath specification in here. And what I do is I remove the complete attribute specification from the list item, and I replace it by the simple number 1. So we're taking the first list item, and then I hit the return button, and yes, we could check if it's working. So I edit it in SPY. I have it here. So we have a chain of green indicators that it's working. I could highlight it, and then you could see Henry Rogers is highlighted here. And even if I remove the Henry Rogers, now Thomas Bach is the next first list item, and I do a refresh here, and I highlight it again, then you can see that the next first item is selected. So this is a strong indication that this works. By the way, you could do it also with the last list item. So selecting the last list item would be to replace the index number 1 by a -1. So -1 is always the last list item. So if I highlight it, it would be the last list item there. So it's Nicole Wallace at the last place. And even if I remove this Thomas Bach and I do a refresh now, and I highlight again, it's still Nicole Wallace, but it's 1 position up now because the list is smaller now. So, but we want to do it with the first list item. So I use the index number 1, and I apply this, and now we have the first list item, which we would like to select with a mouse click. So we have the selection of the first list item. I save this recording module, and I close it, and then I put it in here. So I move it over to my delete list. And then what I need is I simply need to hit the delete button here. So I need another recording module, and let's call it remove element. Here we go. Just a second. I will be back to your question very, very quickly. What did I do now? Oh, yes, I have an empty. So I need to track now my delete entry button here. Hit the button delete person. I move it up, and I do a mouse click. I save it, and I close this. And what we could do now is we fill it in here. So we have remove element here. So this is what we're going to do. So what we have is now the first step. We select the first element, and we remove it. And now we need to do this for a specific number of times. Usually we insert here 8 entries in a row. Yes, to shorten it a little bit, I would like to, insert not all, but to limit the data range. So let's say we only insert the first 4 ones. So I could limit the range here. You could see it down there. So I only insert 4 ones. And that's why I need to remove 4 items here. And that's why I need to revolve through these two steps with the smart folder 4 times. That's why I open the properties of this smart folder by hitting the F4 key, and I increase the iteration count from 1 to 4 and hit the return button. So what I have now is I iterate through this deletion 4 times. And before we step to the next question, I would like to demonstrate how this is working. So let me select this 2. And now we hit the run button and let Ranorex do the job and see how this is going. There's one question coming in. If we want to select a different number, for instance, number 2, then the index in the list in the RanoreXPath specification would be 2. Yes, you're right. So you could insert the indices there, and you even could use a variable. We will show this a little bit later on, how to use variables in a more sophisticated way in the RanoreXPath specification. You even could use a variable to specify the index of this list item. Yes. So you can see now it's removing the list again. So it's working fine to remove this list. So there's one question coming in, and I expected this question to come in. Can't we set the iteration dynamically? I think you mean what if the number of persons to be deleted is not fixed, but it is, yes, it's dynamic. It depends on something else. So usually within a test case, you have fixed or defined numbers. So usually in regular test cases, you don't need to make it dynamic or make it variable. But of course, this is possible. This is the good answer, the good news. The bad news is it's not possible to make it in a codeless way. So I cannot define this iteration here based on any variable. So this is not possible at the moment. But I have an example for you of how to do that. And I would like to show it to you roughly in an overview. We don't want to execute it, but I want to show it to you that it's not rocket science. So any non-very experienced programmer could do this for you. So I have a code module. I have prepared a code module which is called Remove All Entries. And the code module itself receives one module variable, and this variable is the number of entries which are to be deleted. So I open it now and show you this small piece of code where you could see what I mean. The piece of code is a very small one. So first of all, I define a variable, an integer variable, which receives the number of items which are to be deleted. Then I create a loop. It's a loop which counts through this number of items to be deleted. And with every loop run, I decrease the loop counter until it's down to 0. And what I do then is, so the main part is here. What I do here is I do access my repository from within the code. So I'm accessing the first list item repository object. So what I have, let me show this here. I have my first list item repository here. It's the repository item is called first list item. And I can access this repository item from within my code here. It's first list item, and I simply perform a select command on it. And in a second step, then, I simply hit the delete button. So on the other hand here, I have, no, it's not in here, it's in here. I have a repository item which is called button delete person. And I could also it's button delete entry. So it must be button delete person. And I perform a mouse click on that. So I can really very easily create this variable removal of entries in here. One question is who to set the value for the variable number of list items. Yes, I can explain this too. So here it's a very short piece of code, and you could very easily access all the repository items and the RanoreXPath specifications from within code 2 here. And again, as I told you, I will offer this test solution for you for download afterwards. So how to do that? This is very easily done. So if you insert a list of names here, for example, so just to insert one name, then you have a name counter here. You have an item counter here. So you have a counter here, and it's very easy to retrieve this counter by a get value command. So all you need to do is you make a recording module. So I could show you this. We create a new recording module, and we call it get number of entries. So, and all I need to do now is I need to track this number here. So the number is here, it's up here. So I track this number here. I have it here. It's called label number of persons, and I define a so-called get value action. So I'm retrieving the text value of this UI element, and I put it into a variable which I call variable current number of elements. The default value can be 0. I click OK, and now I have stored the value of my current element, the number of my current element into this variable here, and I could use this within my list here. So hopefully I could answer you this sufficiently now, Anchor. Thank you very much for asking this. It was a very interesting and a very valuable question. Any more questions here? Okay, then I would like to go on a little bit. Let me see where we stick to. Oh, yes. What did we do so far? We talked about a little bit about repository or RanoreXPath variables and list item tracking. And now we step into a very interesting field of application. It's table item tracking. So tracking items out or cells out of a spreadsheet or table, an Excel file, is really something which is asked very often from our users, and that's why I would like to show this to you. So I deselect this list item and I select the table item selection. We already have a table here. It's in the UI element test area. So in here we have a table with a number of cells in here. So it's 8 entries in here. It's persons with ages, with gender, and with department affiliation again. And yes, the first thing I would like to do is to set up the selection of the register again. So we need to put it into our setup here and bind it to our parameter. Again, we have a parameter with the UI element testing area, and I bind it to my already parameterized recording module. And what I would like to do now is, let's say we have a list of all the first names, and we would like to print the names of these persons into the report. So we want to read out the age of a person from the table here and print it into the report. So this should be our test scenario. And yes, this is what I would like to show you now. So I'm creating now a new recording module, and it's a table recording module, and let's call it select and report age. Select and report age. So, and to do so, we need to do some cell identification or cell tracking within our table. So I'm using the track button now, and I'm tracking. Let's track the Thomas Bach here, starting with Thomas Bach. I do this because the explanation examples in the user guide also use the same name, so this is fair enough. So you have some common thing in there. So what we have now is we have a repository item which is called first name row 3, and it contains some attribute so tables by default are identified by means of their position within the column and the row. So they are not identified by their content, but they are identified by their column and the row position. So it's just like a cross which you lay over and you see, so it's column number 2 with the first name and row number 3, and there we are. This is the cell. And so we have to, the problem is that whenever we shuffle the cell, so if it's the content which is defines the position, it's not easy to find it anymore. So I would like to guide you through in a stepwise way how we could change the RanoreXPath specification now to receive what we want to have. First of all, I would like to rename this repository item, and I would like to call it cell of Thomas Bach. So now we would like to first of all identify the cell of Thomas Bach. So where Thomas is the first name and Bach is the second name. So what we're going to do is now I edit it in SPY, so I open it to edit in SPY, and yes, here we go. The problem now is if I highlight it, you could see it's already identifying Thomas Bach. So it's Thomas Bach, the cell of Thomas Bach. But the problem now is if I hit the shuffle here, I hit shuffle, the shuffle button, and now Thomas Bach is not where it was anymore. It's 2 cells, 2 rows up here. And if I now do a refresh here in my SPY and I highlight it again, then you can see that it's not finding the cell of Thomas Bach, it's finding the cell of Hannah. So it's finding the cell of Hannah. You could see that here. So fair enough. I hope the synchronization is good enough. So yes, that's what it's supposed to be. And that's why we need to change the RanoreXPath specification now a little bit. So first of all, I would like to show you what to do here now. So first of all, the accessible name, first name, row 3 is not good to me. So I still would like to search in the column of the first row. So I would like to search in the column of the first name here to search for the name. So I'm defining the accessible name, and it should start, so that I don't need to write everything in here. It should start with the text string first for first name, because that's the only column which has first in its name here. So I'm searching in the column with first as the beginning, but I'm searching for a content, which is the text attribute, which starts with or which has Thomas inside. So I'm searching for a cell with Thomas as a content, but only in the column of the first name. So this is what I do here. So I simply hit the return key now. And what you can see is with the green line, I'm still finding a cell. And now if I hit the highlighting, then you can see that I have found my Thomas. Even if I shuffle it now and Thomas has gone down a little bit, then if I do a refresh again and I highlight it again, you can see it's still finding my Thomas now. So first of all, now I have a very shuffle-resistant positioning of one cell. So this is the good news. Now we go a step further. And now we would like not to have the first name, but we would like to have the age of Thomas Bach, which is in the cell 2 positions far from here. And it's in the column with age as a specifier. So what I could do now here is I can extend my RanoreXPath specification. So I use an axis specifier, and I'm within one cell now. So we remember the RanoreXPath specification we have currently specifies one cell, and it's the cell of Thomas. So where Thomas is printed as a first name. That if we want to have another cell, we need to go backwards one step into the row and then back again into a cell. So what I do now is I go backwards, which is indicated by 2 dots, to the row, and then again with an axis specifier, I step into a new cell. And the cell should be the cell with the column of age. So I'm using, there's another thing. If you're not sure what to type in here, we have something which is called IntelliSense. So I could easily now hit, I don't know how to begin now the specification of an attribute or which attributes do I have here with my cell specifier, with my node of a cell. So I could use the Control and the Space key simultaneously, and then I receive the so-called IntelliSense. It's a helping hand which shows me which identifiers I could use now. So which attributes I could use now. So you could see I have the @ symbol, the @ sign for beginning an attribute or any other in here. So, and I would like to go for the accessible name. So I directly could double click it here and I have it here. And the accessible name should begin with, what is it? Age. So I'm searching in the column of age, and I need then, if I now again use my IntelliSense, I see that I need to close it with a bracket here. So you can see now I'm searching for the cell with Thomas as a first name, and let's print out the cell where the according cell of the column age. So this is what I do. I hit the return button. And what I have now here is I highlight it. You can see it. Let's refresh it. And then let's highlight it. And it should be the age of Thomas Bach. So let's shuffle this one more time. So here we go. Refresh it. So here we go. You could see that we are now hitting the age of Thomas Bach. So retrieving the value 42. So this is what we did so far. And yes, I would like to show you another going forward, because we don't want to have the age of Thomas Bach specifically, but we would like to scroll through the table and retrieve all the ages of all entries in this table. So this is what we would like to do. So first of all, we need to define a repository item now and parameterize it, because we are not using Thomas now. And I show you now how to edit this further, because now we are replacing this Thomas, the specification of the name, by a variable. So I'm deleting Thomas here, and instead I'm inserting a variable name. Let's call it variable first name. And what you can see is that Ranorex immediately recognizes this as a variable, because it prints it in green. And this is the indication that we already have a variable here. So I'm searching now for a first name which is specified within a variable, and print out its age, which is in 2 cells afterwards in the column of age. So this is what I click apply for. This is not now the cell of Thomas Bach, but what I do now here is I simply copy it, I copy paste it, and I call this now age of person. That's the age of a parameterized person. And yes, I would like to go back to the other one and correct this for you, because if you would download this solution, you should have something in mind and at hand, which what we developed. So this is the cell of Thomas Bach, and this is the age of the person, of any person, which is specified through this variable. So yes, let's try this out now, and let's go for a mouse click. So I define a mouse click on this age here. So I save this and I close it, and I put it into my test case now. So select and report age. We have it here. Now we have an unbound variable. I need to define a data set here, so a data source. So I'm selecting my, let's say, my database here. So we have the first names in here. We only make use of our first names, and I bind the first name to my module variable. So I don't use the age, for instance. I really print out the age. So what I have here is now I'm crawling through my table, and I'm pointing to the age of all of these entries here. So let's run this and see if we did a good job with our special RanoreXPath specification. So we are waiting for Ranorex to create the solution and execute it. And now watch out then the table entries, and there should be, yeah, here we go. It's crawling through the age. It's going through all the ages down there. We still have a problem because it's, yeah, we still have a small problem. We receive a successful test report, but and the test report tells us that we have been crawling through all the table items. But if we have a look at the table itself, we see that the last two entries, they have been hidden below. So there was no place to show them. They have been hidden below. But Ranorex told us that it still pointed out those two cells, which is in fact not true, because we could see that it did not point it out. And I would like to show you one improvement to this. And the improvement is not to use a mouse click, but to use an invoke action. And this is something which I would like to show you. So instead of clicking with the mouse, we are using the invoke action and select this cell, the H cell. So I'm disabling now the mouse click, and I only perform an invoke action on the cell. So this is what I'm going to do. I save it, and again, I run the test. And now watch out the cells, because you will see that Ranorex now makes the cell visible before it selects it. So this is one nice way of making hidden elements within a table or somewhere else visible again. So here you see it's the same with the visible ones, but now it's making it visible when it comes to the selection of the below and the non-visible cell items. And now the test report is successful, fair enough, and it's okay for that. And that's why we now finish our test scenario, because we would like to print the age into the report. So this is what I would like to do. So at the moment, we only select it. And I would like to show you how to retrieve values out of, retrieve the values. Let me show this here again. So we don't want to just look at this age. We simply want to retrieve it. So we want to take it out of and do something with it. And the easiest thing to do something is to print it into the report. And I would like to show you how to do that now. So first of all, we select the cell. You could see that here. As the second thing, we need to retrieve the value from the cell and put it into a variable. So this is what I do next. So I'm taking the repository item again. It's the cell already containing the age. So I use a get value, and I'm retrieving the text value of this cell, and I'm putting it into a new variable. I call this variable result age. So I'm putting the value of this cell, I'm writing the value of this cell into a variable which I call variable result age. And what I do now is I simply use a few report log messages. So the first one is I simply print the line in and I call it age of. Then I put another one in here, and then I print the name of the person, which is already in a variable. So this is already done. I have it in the data source, that's why I can use it here. And then I need another report here, another log message, and I call it if. And finally, I need to print the value of the age itself. So I'm printing the value of this variable. So what I have here is just for your understanding. I'm performing an invoke action to select the cell with the age. In the second action, I'm retrieving the age and I write it into a local variable. Then I'm printing 4 report lines. The first one, I say the age of the person is, and then I print the value which is in my temporary variable. So this is what I'm going to do. Hopefully not too complicated, and let's perform it and finally see what's happening there. So I simply hit the run button and let this tiny little test execute. And afterwards we will do some nasty things with selecting a checkbox within the table. So let's run this. Here you can see it's performing, it's crawling through the table with all the age cells, and even the non-visible ones are made visible here, and they are in the background printed into the report. So even if it was a little bit too fast for you now, it's printed in the report and we could watch it. So I open up the report now, and let's step into the second last one here and show you this. So again, with the spotlight, we have the test data set of Will Thomas, and he's of age 32. This is something we know out of the data source. And then the only thing we used here is Will. So we are invoking or making the cell visible. So we select the cell, we are getting the age out into the variable, and then we are printing the age of Will is, and the result is 32 years, which is retrieved out of the table cell. So there's one question coming in. Can you please again explain the invoke action? Yes, of course I can do. So stepping back here into our recording module is, we have the invoke action is a special type of action defined for users mainly to make non-visible things visible. So for example, I will show you just later on, so the invoke action specifies, is depending, the functions, the available functions of the invoke action is depending on the UI, the type of the UI element. So if the UI element is a cell, a table cell, then you can, then you have 4 possible actions here. You could select it, you could take a focus on it, you can ensure that it's visible or accessible, do default action, which means simply clicking on it. And if your UI element is tree, then you have another invoke action which helps you to expand all the tree items or to to put those again. So invoke action is a helping function to perform things on a UI element which you could not easily do without it. So this is simply spoken. And I would like to point out to it at the user guide. We have a very nice description in the user guide and some fields of application there. So we mainly use this to wait for something to appear or to make it visible if it's non-visible. Hopefully this is sufficiently explained to you now. Yes, there's another question in how to put the information into one line. So what I did now here is I simply applied what I have at hand. So what I have at hand with the default behavior is I need to use one line of the report for every information here. But the good news is the report itself can be completely individualized and configured by yourself. But this is a specific separate topic which unfortunately extends the scope of today's webinar. So I could only point out to the user guide where you could read and inform yourself of how to configure and extend the functionality of the report. So that's why what I used here just for a quick and dirty approach for explanation purposes. There's one other question is, how do you evaluate the report because you don't want to look at it to confirm it's been done? No, I should say the report by itself is only a visual sign what has happened during, or a summary, a written summary of what has happened during the test execution. Usually, you would do something like a validation. So every test case should contain a kind of validation. So what I want to show you here is how to retrieve data from a cell. But what you do with the cell itself, the value itself, is up to the requirement of your test. So usually you would use the age for some validation purpose. So this is not within the scope of this explanation. I would like to show you how to retrieve things from the table, how to specify a RanoreXPath to get to a value of the cell, but what you do with the cell. So you're right, you would not only print it into the report, but you would do some validation. So for example, you would validate if the value is between 18 so that the person is grown up and below 110, which should not be possible, or is seller, or 120 because we don't know persons being older than 120 or something like that. So this is what you would like to do with the cell probably then. How to validate? This is exactly what I told you. So you would not use this variable just to print it into the report, but you would use this variable to match it against something. So I could define a validation then and simply validate if this, so you could define a validation here, for example, and then I could use my variable, the result, to prove if it equals something or so. So this is something which you would rather do than to simply print it into a report. So, there's one question coming in. Does the invoke action work on virtualized lists? To be honest, I do not understand what you're asking just for the moment. So what do you mean with a virtualized list? The invoke action, for just to clarify this, an invoke action does not work on a list, it works on a UI element. So if I have, for instance, this tree here, the tree on the left side here, then an invoke action could be used to expand all the subtree elements. So this is how the invoke action works. An invoke action always needs some UI element. So, yeah, we have some 20 minutes, so the time is fleeting. And I would like to go on a little bit and show you now something else. I show you a little trick here because I would like to show you how to select and deselect certain checkboxes here in my table. So this is something which is also asked very, very often. And this is what I would like to show you now. There is one question again coming in. This is another question. Could you fast make the video available fast? Some of your examples I need it now. I'm sorry. We are currently recording this session. After the session, I'm preparing the video, and after this preparation, you will receive the video by today. I promise you will have it today, but not earlier. I cannot give it to you now because we're currently recording the session live. So, yes. One other thing is a virtualized list is where VBF framework will dynamically create only the items that are in view. Yes, you can use that, of course. Invoke action is possible on every UI element, independent if it is static or if it is created dynamically during the session. So, of course, you could do that. So, I would like to go further now, and yes, I would like to show you how to select things in here. And just as we are, not very good in time anymore, I would like to do this in a somehow instructional way. So let me first of all close this here, and now creating a new recording module, and I would like to name it check female entries. So the test scenario is, from this table, I only would like to track the female, to check the female ones in here. So I would like to go through the complete list, but only select the female entries here and skip the male ones. So this is also something which is very often asked from our users, and I would like to show you now in a short instructional way how to do this. So first of all, I would like to track the row of any row here of this cell. So I'm tracking this row where Cindy Public is in here. So what I have now here is a UI element which is called row 4, and it has definitely some accessible name row 4. So what we want to have it here is, I name it checkbox of female entries. So this is what I would like to name it. And then I open it in Spy and I do some nasty things in there just to explain to you what I do. So first of all, I remove the cell because we are not looking for a cell at the moment, but we're looking for a row at the moment. And we are not looking of one row, we are looking for a row, for any row which is specified by an index. So this is what can be done with a variable. Again, this is something which we already have done with the list items. So also the rows of a table can be accessed via an index, and this index can be given by means of a variable. What we do then is we are not only looking for the row itself, but we are looking for a cell in the row. We are looking for one cell in the row, and the cell should be a cell where the gender of the person is female. So we are looking for a cell, and I specified it by 2 attributes now, just like the Thomas Bach we had before. So it's very similar. So we're looking for a cell where the accessible name, which means it's the column, starts with gender. So we're only searching in the column of gender, and we're searching for a gender, which is the content of the cell, text of the cell, is female. So what we do for the moment is we are accessing a row indicated by a variable, and we are searching only for cells where the gender is female. And then we would like to access the cell where the checkbox is. So again, we are stepping back from the row, from the cell to the row, and we are accessing the cell with the index number 2 because the checkbox is the second cell in the row. So this is what we do, and we simply apply this now. Unfortunately, if you open this in SPY, of course, Ranorex is not able to find this anymore. So what you could see here is, unfortunately, we have a number of red dots here because Ranorex cannot find this specific cell anymore because we have a variable in there. And if you have one or more variables within the RanoreXPath specification, you need to try it out because it's not finding it automatically. So that should be advised. So we have this checkbox for the female. And what I do now is I simply create an invoke action again. Again, we have, we would like to select it to make it visible. And the second thing is then we would like to check it. And checking it could also be done by a set value now. I could click it, but I don't want to click it. I would like to set it, and I set the accessible value of this checkbox here, of checkbox, simply to true. This is what I do. So I select the checkbox of every cell where the gender is a female, and I set the accessible value to true, which is another action for simply clicking it or checking it. So, and then usually I would like to show you this by step-by-step demonstration, but unfortunately, as I tell you, we only have some 15 minutes left. I need to show you some things which we also need to do now. What it does now is it goes through the complete list, the table here, and it only is looking for female entries, and then it's checking the female entries here. Unfortunately, all the other male rows, the rows with the male entries, are specified as failures because Ranorex, the RanoreXPath, the element, the UI element cannot be found because the RanoreXPath tells something different, and this is treated somehow like a failure. And if you keep the default behavior of Ranorex Studio, then your test would abort with the first row where the gender is not a female. And that's why we need to do some tricks here now. And the first trick is I open up the properties of my actions here by hitting the F4 button. And the first trick is that the default behavior of any action is that it does not continue if it fails. So if it fails, it will simply fail and stop. And this is what you have to change now. We have to change it, and we have to tell every action in here that it needs to continue in case of a failure. So this is the first trick we need to do. The second trick is that usually if Ranorex is searching now within the table for a female and it doesn't find a female in a row, then it's waiting until the timeout is over. So it's trying to search and search and search, and you need to know that. So just to prevent that the search takes too long for this repository item, you need to change the property of the search timeout from 30 seconds, let's say, down to 2 seconds. So you need to specify that that Ranorex is only searching for 2 seconds until it gives up and steps to the next row. And this is the third trick now. If we step back to the test case, I insert now the check female entries here and into this smart folder. And the next trick is that if you see it, if you look at the properties of the smart folder, then you see that it has an arrow behavior. If inside, because not finding a female row is an arrow, it's still an arrow. We told the actions to continue, but it's still an arrow. And all the default behavior of the smart folder is also that in the case of an arrow, it continues with the sibling. So it stops here and continues with the next smart folder or the next test case in line. So this is something we would also change now, because in this case, we would like to not continue it with the sibling, but we would like to continue it with the next iteration. So we want it to go on to the next row and the next row and the next row. So this is the only way of telling Ranorex now to step through all these data rows. Finally, I need to bind it to my data now. So I do the data binding, and I'm binding the row to the row index, because I have a data source here, which simplified is an index of the rows. So from row Q to row 9, I'm scrolling through the table. So this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to show you now. So let's close the application, and let's run this test case and see how it goes. So we let Ranorex Studio prepare the test and run through all these table entries through the rows and only select the female ones. So you can see now it always takes some 2 seconds to wait, and now the Mary Bach is the first female one. It has been checked. Henry Rogers is skipped. Thomas Bach is also skipped. And Cindy should be the next one. Hannah should be the next one. And then we're going back. Will is also skipped, and Nicole is also checked. So we have a green pie chart, although we have a number of warnings, of course, because, yes, it's treated like an error. But at the end of the day, you can see that the table has been checked with the correct female persons in there. So this was rather be a little bit quick, I know that. But again, I will give you the download of this solution, the download link of this solution, and then you can download it and try it out on your own. And you will see this is not rocket science. It's simplified, experimenting a little bit more with the RanoreXPath specification. So let me see what we have done so far. Yes, 8 minutes to go, but still a lot to do. But it's looking good, because it's not that much anymore. I would like to skip now, or not go into the tree and subtree element selections, but I would like to show you the wildcard search first on the concept of defined automation identifiers, because I consider this to be very important, and it's not that much. So tree and subtree element selections is a little bit longer, but I would like to step into this first. So let me go out here. And what do I mean by this? So for example, let me step into search, just a second. Here we go. Let me open SPY for that. We have SPY, the SPY tool here, and let's see this our name application. So the RanoreXPath can also be used to search for specific UI elements. So for example, we have a UI element here. It's the radio button, and it's labeled green light. So for example, if you don't want to track it, but you want to identify it, you want to search for it, then you can use the RanoreXPath specification to search for this UI element. I would like to show you in a simple example how to do that. And there's a number of applications for this. So first of all, we're starting with the application under test. This is the basis where we start from. And now I would like to show you how to search for this. So I'd like to specify now a RanoreXPath for the search. So I'm searching, first of all, anywhere. Oops, this was too much. So I'm searching anywhere. I do a double slash, which is the any optional wildcard operator. I'm searching anywhere within my application under test. And then I'm searching for anything, for any UI element, which is simply an asterisk. And then I'm specifying the attribute. And I use a question mark to search for any attribute which, and I put this under the masks here, which is labeled green light. So I'm searching anywhere. I'm searching for any UI, every UI element, which has any argument, any parameter which is labeled green light. So I hit the return button and let Phi find it. And what you could see is now it's labeled red and it finds it. So it has found the correct UI element within my application. You could go into the path editor, which is nothing more at the moment, and usually you could update the path and it will then find it and turn it into your regular path. Yeah. So update path. If you press update path, then you are redirected from your search formulation or search specification into the regular RanoreXPath, and now you have the RanoreXPath specification. So this can be used. This is how you could use the RanoreXPath specification for searching for something. And another thing is the introduction to the concept of defined automation identifier. I would like to show you what I mean. So I step back into the last object panel here, and we have a number of buttons here. So if I track one button here, let's track this button number 1, then you have a button which has an attribute which is called control. It's the control names attribute, and it's simply button number 1. So this is a default way. If developers program your graphical user interface, they usually assign no specific names to UI elements. And the IDE, the programming IDE, assigns default names to this UI element. And sometimes it's tricky and hard for you to use this because these default names may change. And if you use the default names within your RanoreXPath specifications and the UI changes and any other button receives this control name, then you're really pissed off, and then you won't find it anymore. That's why you should ask yourself, why don't we have a defined automation identifier? And most often, usually it's because you do not request it. So you need to talk to your development department to request this. And if I track another button here, for example, the button number 2, then I have assigned it a specific control name. It's called now button activate something, but it could be anything. So you should force or motivate your development department to give you specified automation identifiers for important UI elements, which are crucial for testing the application. And then this makes your life much easier than simply taking what you get from the development department. So this is something which I wanted to give you at the end here. Yes, which brings me to the end. We are almost at the end. There's only one topic we skipped at the moment, which was the tree item specification and tree item tracking. I would like to pack this into my demo application and serve this over. And all what I have showed you today will find its way very soon into the update of our online user guide, and you could read it in there. So all what we have done today will be in there, of course. So unfortunately, we are running out of time. Are there questions? Still, there would be time to answer 1, 2 questions. Are there questions? When do you recommend to work with variables and databases is one question. To be honest, I recommend to do this all the time because it's not a good habit to code usernames to code data into the test itself. So it's always a good way to do this by means of external data sources. And it's only if you make a CSV file or an Excel file, it's good because then it makes your test more modular and more parameterized. So it's a good way of always to work with variables and external data sources. Not necessarily SQL databases. It can be CSV files, Excel files, or simple data tables, but it's a good advice to use it all the time. Another question is coming in, can you give a hint where I can find information about database using in a data-driven way? Yes, I can. This is something which I wanted to do anyway. So let me point out to Ranorex homepage. We step on to the Ranorex website, and you step in through the support and the help center. And here you have the landing page of our online user guide, where you find in the Ranorex Studio Advanced section is the section of your choice now. And here you have everything about the RanoreXPath, which I dealt with today. So almost all the examples are already in here. And there's also the first section here is data-driven testing. And here in the section, how to manage and assign data sources, we explain in a step-by-step way how to define the connection to an SQL database, for instance. So another question is coming. If I have different combinations of variables data, do I need to have one smart folder for each different CSV file? Oh, this is a very good question, Marcus. Let me step back here. I just want to see where to go to first. Introduction. We have, let me step in here. No, I would like to show you in the solution. Here we go. Here you could see something in here. I have 4 different smart folders here, and I have data sources in here. I should say at the beginning, the visibility of a data source is downwards. So if you define a data source, for instance, in this smart folder here, the smart folder is called print age of specific table row, and it has the defined data source, which is called my database. So this data source, my database, will be visible in all subfolders down from this folder, but it's not visible upstairs. So it's not visible in this test case, and this data source is not visible in any other test case. So we have a downward visibility, and but this visibility intersects. So if you have a second smart folder down there, then my database is visible here too, but my table rows is not visible in here, and so it's always downward. So you could decide where to define. I could define the data sources up here too, but I didn't want to do that because I would like to. A good advice is to define data sources as close as possible to their use and application. So not to confuse yourself with the visibility of different data sets and data ranges and so on and so forth. I hope this answers your question, Marcus. So we're almost at the end, I guess. And I also already have explained a number of things in here. So what is to expected next for you? You will receive a follow-up email as soon as I have processed and cut the video. This will last approximately 2 to 3 hours. And within this email, you will receive the on-demand link of the recording, and you will receive the download link for the solution you could download. If you did not happen to ask all the questions, you could redirect our questions to webinar@ranorex.com, and I will answer every single question which comes in there. So, last call for questions. No questions anymore. My name is Andreas. Thank you very much for being here, for spending some time with me. I hope you enjoyed this webinar. I thank you very much. I wish you a great day. Thank you and goodbye.